All right, YouTube, it's time to cover the topic of why there's such a disconnect between the relative inaccuracy of mass media, you would think of the TV generation style of news and media, and pollsters and pundits and talking heads of various kinds, why there's such a disconnect between that class of information and the sort of decentralized information disseminated on the internet on a second to second basis across millions of YouTube channels and Facebook pages and Twitter accounts and blogs and everything else you can possibly think of. I would like to point this out. If you look back at even the most accurate pollsters and odds makers, somebody like Nate Silver, who was very, very accurate in 2012, also was doing very well in the 2010 midterms and even to an extent in 2014. If you look at these individuals who did very well in the last few cycles predicting what would happen politically in this country, someone like Charles Krauthammer, all of these individuals that tend to be on TV a lot, they get interviewed a lot, people take them seriously, at least the other pundits do. And you compare their accuracy with their accuracy so far in this political cycle, mostly it's lackluster in comparison. That is, that their accuracy in predicting things has gone down substantially. Their accuracy in predicting things is, in some cases, it's almost non-existent. Polling firms that were performing really well a few electoral cycles ago all of a sudden are in the trash bin. You would think of Gallup or something like that. Upstarts like YouGov are rising steadily in accuracy. Even web-only firms are doing, oddly enough, in some cases, doing better than what you would think of as the mainstream, the accredited polling firms. The reason for that is this. Two things are happening right now in this political cycle that are totally screwing with the conventional wisdom of pollsters and pundits, the conventional wisdom of the established mainstream. The first is that the election that's currently happening is a paradigm shift. I spoke about this last year. I spoke about this very early. And we should have seen this coming the second that Ron Paul was not taken seriously at the convention, really in 2012. We should have seen that the mainstream increasingly has been viewed by the public as out of touch, and that a paradigm shift was coming. It's happened before. It happened, the Republican Party in the 1800s was born out of a similar shift. The rise of sort of the Southern strategy, the Goldwater, Nixonian era Southern strategy was similar in many respects. The civil rights movement was the last time that it was a major change, and then of course you had the sort of mini shift between Carter and Reagan, and now we're entering another one. What you have to realize is that American politics between Herbert Walker Bush and roughly around until the last midterms were relatively stable. The two political parties essentially espoused the same centrist, watered-down ideology. People, generally speaking, tolerated the concept. You look at Citizens United, which is not an old decision. They generally tolerated the concept of having corporate and union and lobbyist money in their elections. They had bigger things to worry about, terrorism or whatever. And this election has shifted and turned into a referendum not just on Obama's policies, but really upon the policies of the DNC and the RNC as a whole, which is why they're scared right now. So the first thing that happened was just a paradigm shift, and it's very difficult. People whose algorithms and common sense are based on a false view of American politics as somehow stable. You would look at any of these people trying to predict which states will be swing states. You have no idea which states are going to be swing states. We've seen paradigm shifts before where all of a sudden the map looks completely different. Polling taken right now about, well, which candidate can win against which other candidate in the general election. These people haven't even debated one another yet. Your predictions are absolutely useless right now at this point because you have no idea what exactly is going to happen, especially at the Republican convention. I would say to a lesser degree, is Bernie Sanders going to run as an independent? There still remains a possibility that he will. So these people are stumped. They have no clue exactly how to predict anything because they didn't see a paradigm shift coming. They spent the last months declaring Trump would eventually collapse. Sanders would not continue to have any significant support. I happen to agree with the reigning ideology that he will not become the Democratic nominee. But I happen to deeply disagree with the concept that his support will not continue to remain high, perhaps high enough to justify him saying the DNC has failed the progressive movement. I'm running on a third-party platform. I'm running as an independent, maybe Elizabeth Warren as his VP pick. I think that's still a possibility, and I think if Trump is denied the nomination, there's a near 100% chance he'll run as an independent. He'll be the next Ross Perot. So the first is the paradigm shift. The second problem for these people is that none of their algorithms or concepts of political stability have managed to give them the foresight to see exactly how much of a role social media would play in this election. In past elections, up until roughly the 2012 election, where it became relatively potent, and it's become far more potent since then, up until that period, the internet still had a backseat role in U.S. elections. It was really still the TV generation, essentially speaking. That is, most people still got their information from mass media. In fact, if they went on the internet, they were most likely to get a primarily large chunk of their ideas, of their opinions, from, again, the corporate media, which early and often dominated the web, specifically because they saw it as a possibly lucrative venture. They said, we can stretch out to a younger generation. They're obviously abandoning TV, so we'll cater to them here. The problem is, since then, there's been a massive proliferation of minor political movements, people who talk about politics, social reformists, activism, and so forth, that is now moving too quickly for them to actually control people's ideologies. The corporate media likes to control people, just like the government does. Now, but you would think of it this way. You go on television, you have hundreds of channels, far more than there were back in the early 90s, certainly for most people. That's true. But almost all of the media there is controlled by a half a dozen companies. If a show is being produced by some other production crew, some other company, it's just working in affiliation with one of the larger companies. You know, you would have some film studio making its series, but really, I mean, they're showing it through affiliation with a specific large corporation. So they can control what you're watching. They can't do that on the internet. The fact that the internet is still admittedly dominated by a handful of very large internet firms. You would think of Google, which owns YouTube. You would think of Facebook. You would think of all of these different... Recently, of course, Gawker got fucked, and they'll probably go out of business, but they control a bunch of other supposedly independent sites. People don't even realize that it's part of the same matrix under the same larger company, like Jezebel. It's just a subsidiary of Gawker. You would look at that, but then you would say, through those services in the social media era, literally tens of millions of people have adopted varying degrees of popularity talking about political and social and religious issues. It's extremely difficult for any of these larger groups to muster the sort of effort required to knock out all of these other individuals. I will take myself as an example. I have about 1/10 of the subscribers that Fox News' verified channel has. Fox News produces sometimes 50 or 60 videos a day. Sometimes I go 3 days without making a video, yet I've managed to put together 1/10 of their subscriber base. This is a major corporate entity, a major media entity worth literally billions of dollars, with all the staff and production in the world to use, the sort of kingpin of American mass media. And yet somebody like myself, or certainly there are other people that talk about politics on YouTube that are much more popular than I am, in some cases have more support than the entire Fox News network does through its own verified YouTube channel. Increasingly, people are moving away from TV, and they're getting much of their information online. Some of it they get a handful of people and groups are producing material, and then it gets spread around on an additional layer of social media through Twitter at lightning speed, reactions on YouTube, getting mirrored on YouTube, shared all over Facebook and so forth, posted all over the internet. It's impossible for anybody like Nate Silver to truly understand what kind of information made in which way is going to go viral. People, for instance, the last Trump ad that he ran against Hillary, with the Hillary barking and then Putin laughing at her, sort of. A lot of people from the mass media chimed in, specifically people who didn't like Trump, of course. They chimed in and said, well, it looks like it was put together by, a 10th grader or something. Of course it was. That's the sort of material that goes viral on the internet. The problem is the mass manufactured stuff that's created, stuff from the past that is focus group tested, no longer works as well. It would be much easier to pay some random 10-year-old to slap together a political video for you, something that doesn't even have to really make sense and has a couple of corny jokes in it, put it on the internet, and it'll probably go viral. You'll ultimately get more attention than you will from something that cost you $500,000 to put together and weeks of effort to do it with an entire focus group saying, yes, this is a good video. That's why people's predictions, if they're not in tune with social media culture, fall short. These people aren't really part of that generation. There are plenty of people on YouTube, some of them, they're not even, you'd think of, again, I've mentioned him earlier today, Ramsey Paul. Now, I'm not sure about his exact age. He's got that thing going on where his hair is gray, but his face actually looks pretty young. I honestly don't know how old he is. I mean, he could be like prematurely graying and in his 30s, or he could be, pushing 60 or so. I don't know. But he's obviously not part of my generation, I would say. And yet he can pull in, tens or hundreds of thousands of people, more than any of these major corporations are capable of doing online. And that's the sort of stuff that drives interest, that gets spread around, that goes viral, that becomes popular. The people who require focus groups and techies and accountants and lawyers and all these different things that they have to pay for to create material that's worth watching are at a grave disadvantage against an entirely decentralized internet in which some random, often shitty video can be created and suddenly go viral and change millions of people's minds. We saw what happened with Zeitgeist, and that's pre-social media era for the most part. Zeitgeist is sort of dawn of Facebook, pre-Twitter era. Zeitgeist reached many millions of people. It wasn't accurate. It wasn't even particularly well made, and yet millions and millions of people watched it, and all of a sudden everybody on your friends list was telling you to watch this new documentary, which was really just sort of a mockery, sort of an Alex Jones-style mockery of the New World Order or something. You would think of underground media. Look at before it's news. I posted a few things on there. If a person knows what they're doing with regards to fear-mongering or propagandizing, they can get really popular. And you've seen like Pete Sanchilli. He puts his stuff on there and sort of rides roughshod over his critics. Always has comments closed, by the way. Now, 9/10 of what you see on there, because it's independently submitted content, isn't even really worth reading. And yet it's likely to get just about as many viewers as something that's posted on CNN.com. Even the websites of these mass media groups are completely reliant upon social media. Some of these news sites have gotten enormous amounts of criticism for closing down the comments on certain articles or all articles at different times. For a while, Fox had its comments closed. It quickly realized that the shitstorm of their supposedly racist commenters was mild compared to the shitstorm of those same people once they took to their other accounts to complain about the fact that the comments were closed. You've seen, I believe it's The Guardian, some of the European media, on anything that deals with Islam or religion or whatever, they close down comments. And people are, I think rightfully angry about such things. a group like HuffPost or The Guardian or RT or Vice or any of these different groups that produces sort of the professional style material is at a loss to deal with the social media generation. They only exist. They're only continuing to make money because they keep comments open and they allow other people to react to what they've written. The problem is, most of the people going to those articles, they're not really there for the article. They don't have enough of an attention span to really care about the fucking article. They're there for the comments. They're there to attack one another in the free and open anonymous world of the internet for the most part. And the mass media and the government, which loves the mass media, pets them, is very gentle with them, loves them a lot, gives them lots of kickbacks in the form of lucrative interview slots and things like that. The government and the mass media have raised holy hell to try to convince the soccer mom pearl clutchers that anonymous commenting is evil and all the Nazis will indoctrinate your child, or any of a million other things that they claim. Oh, you will be cyberbullied, you will be doxxed, your identity will become known. They've done this specifically because they're tired of having to deal with the fact that most of the time the articles that they write get half the attention of some random fucking Facebook page or YouTuber or somebody on Twitter who has a satirical account. Look at the Dems are real racist account on Twitter, pretending to be a conservative pundit and sort of satirizing the center right, the corporate right wing. And then look at the number of people that look at these things. I mean, it's many hundreds of people, and that's just on Twitter. By the way, Twitter's a shell of its former self, and it's still hyper-powerful. A shell of its former self because they hired Anita Sarkeesian, and now they sort of censor and use algorithms to demote material that they happen not to like. So it's really, as far as free speech goes, it's now well behind YouTube and somewhere a little bit behind Facebook. And at the same time, they still control an inordinate amount of the public dialogue compared to, foxnews.com or something like that. Nobody gives a fuck about that. Most of the people that even know who these people are, that know who Keith Olbermann is, that know who Bill O'Reilly is, they don't know them as the person on the TV, the person they trust and they really like. They know them as some random person that happens to be in a YouTube video they just watched. Or somebody who said something at dinner that got leaked out from a phone call and then got posted on Twitter. And it really helps politicians and media heads and all these idiots get held accountable, too, to some extent, because basically everything they do is somewhere it's on somebody's cell phone. They can't even take a crap in privacy. I don't even really care if their privacy is violated for the most part. I don't think that public officials have any reasonable expectation of privacy. I think we should just tell them to shut the fuck up sometimes. But think about it. Some random YouTuber with millions and millions of subscribers, they drive more attention than certain actual mass media groups. Now, some of these people have sort of sucked the teat of Google or something like that. They become partners, and then they have the ads, and they have, you saw the Fine Brothers whatever bullshit going on where they tried to actually copyright a specific style of YouTube title, which was asinine. They should have known better. Some of these people, yeah, they're getting rich and they've got corporate sponsors and stuff like that. Others, they don't have that sort of stuff. Like my channel, it's grassroots. The only money I'm making from making YouTube videos is through Patreon. That's voluntary. I don't have ads enabled. I don't have corporate sponsors. In fact, I tell them to shut the fuck up if they tried. Other than Red Bull, if the Red Bull company contacted me and offered me money to drink Red Bull on camera, I'd be all on board with it. I'd say, okay, how much Red Bull are you going to send me? That'd be the first question that I would ask. There's going to have to be free Red Bull in there, not just monetary payment, because if I wake up and I'm really, sort of out of it, I want the Red Bull right by my bedside. If I reach out and I grab a $100 bill, well, that's great for getting Red Bull later. It's not so good for right when I get up. I kind of need that can to be next to me right when the alarm goes off, so to speak. Most of the people driving most of the attention online, the big bloggers, the big YouTubers, the Facebook groups, they're not run by members of the RNC, the DNC, of Fox News or something. Even like the Being Liberal page that I criticize up and down constantly, it's not run by the DNC. It's not run by Huffington Post. It's run by a bunch of people who happen to have early on in the Facebook era. They made a page of that name. It got popular, and now they administrate it. They're just random individuals. You may not even know anything about any of the admins there. I run the Times of Poll page. It's much smaller. It's sort of alt-right and libertarian. Less than 1,000 people liking the page, but it still allows me to disseminate information to a rather large group of other people instantly. I was briefly on Twitter. I took my Twitter account down when they decided to start using algorithms to demote stuff that they didn't like as a form of protest, because I'm like, if I can get like 23, 24, whatever it is, 1,000 people on YouTube, eventually I could end up with a lot of people on Twitter. I just don't want to drive that interest. I'll stay on YouTube, which is what I'm used to anyway. It's more convenient for me. I can sit here and rant for hours if I want to. I can't really do that on Twitter. After a while, your fingers are going to get a little bit sore. I have to wear thimbles on each fingertip. But yeah, that's why the pollsters and the pundits have been consistently wrong. They kept saying for months and months, after it was clear that it was never going to fucking happen, they kept saying, oh, Jeb will rise back up. Don't worry, Jeb's really the inevitable nominee of the Republican Party. Oh, don't worry, Hillary's going to win every state. Sanders can't win Michigan, can't win Nebraska or something like that. Can't win Colorado. My political predictions have been far more accurate than almost anybody in the mainstream media at this point. Why am I not getting like they should fire Krauthammer and put me there, because I would do a better job and they could pay me half as much and I would consider myself lucky. The mass media is basically dying off within this country at this point. A lot of the people there, hate to say it, but mostly, now there are exceptions, like I said, Ramsey Paul, there are plenty of people not in this category. Most people who are on the older side are not fully cued in with social media. A lot of them have staffers making their tweets for them. They have staffers uploading the YouTube videos, managing the Facebook page or whatever. The politician or the media head or the talking head or whatever. You think Bill O'Reilly manages his own Twitter account? No, of course, it probably doesn't even know how to make a tweet. Well, that's why they're inaccurate. They are not tuned in to how most of the people are getting their info. By the way, it's international too. The internet's an international effort. Anybody in the world who's connected to the internet can weigh in on the U.S. elections, can weigh in on what's happening in Brazil, can weigh in on North Korea, or anything. The pitchfork-waving mob that people were worried about a decade ago on the internet, which is true, that's basically what you got, in a way has turned out to be a good thing, because there's also a sense of camaraderie building between people in different countries. If you go to 4chan, you'll see it all the time. You're going to see lots of shit posting. You're going to see a lot of xenophobia directed at people, especially from certain nations. But at the end of the day, you don't even know what they look like. You don't know what their name is. You don't know really anything about them. It's no respecter of persons when you're there. There is a sense of camaraderie that I think that I can't be the only one that feels when somebody from some other country is posting about some event in their country. There's an appreciation there for the fact that you may not have even known that it was going on had you not been there to witness that thread. This happens all over the internet. 4chan's the best at it. YouTube's pretty damn good at it as well. Some of the others, Facebook, not so much really. You got to sort of search out the pages that are still active in order to get that sort of point of view. But, someone like Nate Silver from the pre-social media generation, or early social media generation, still retains some semblance of accuracy, but has been wrong dozens of times on the Republican race, has been wrong about Sanders, has made many grave errors as far as predicting which way states would go. The record is even worse for people on like any of the major news corporations. At this point, there's really not even a reason to take them seriously. So yeah, the TV era is ending. TV now is relegated to basically people own a TV to watch YouTube videos in many cases. I've watched YouTube videos on TV, and if it's not that, it's going to be Netflix, honestly. Do I spend my day watching the stuff that's sort of in the program slots for the mainstream channels? Hell no. There's nothing interesting there to watch, because it's been all strangulated out by the fact that they've conglomerated everything under half a dozen very large TV corporations. There's no reason to watch it. And so you end up having web-based content playing on a TV. It's actually almost surreal. It's changed quite a lot since when I was a kid. And they didn't have flat screen televisions. High def back then meant your TV had a flat screen and a very large back on it and didn't constantly fuzz out, basically. That's what a high def TV was back in the 90s. Then DVDs came out. People thought it was a magical invention. I can remember when DVDs first started becoming common. I can remember, oh wow, pictures so clear. I don't want to sound all, I'm not even 30. Technology is ultimately moving a hell of a lot quicker now than it was in the past generations. They had to wait, years and years for the sort of advances that we sometimes see in a month. So at this point, you don't have to feel old when you remember that you've gone through 2 or 3 different epochs of technology just related to the internet. Because honestly, not that much time has fucking elapsed, ultimately. YouTube, 2003, in that span of time, look at how it has taken off. It's gone from really tiny, grainy, ever buffering things. It was all I did was look up like 80s music videos when I first started getting into YouTube when I was in high school. And then very quickly, look at where we are now. You can live stream, you can have an audio-based stream without any video at all sorts of stuff. That's the way that it goes. A large corporation is incapable of keeping up because it needs 6 months and a 100-person focus group just to know what to do. That's about all. Peace out.